We're here to talk about personalization. I guess it's been the biggest trend in retail for the last decade. AI has probably been trying to dethrone it as the single biggest thing that we've been talking about, but hasn't quite succeeded. Here we are again talking about personalization. As the years go by, the personalized experiences we're able to create have been getting better and better, but we haven't quite reached the holy grail, right? And then this year there was another hugely significant milestone, the introduction of GDPR. And that has put all of the control over the use of data to the individuals, how data is processed, how it's used, especially how it's used to profile them, and therefore to personalize the experiences for them. So does this affect the future of personalization? Is personalization something that customers actually want? What are the challenges to doing it well? These are some of the questions that hopefully our esteemed panelists will be covering in the next half an hour or so. And halfway through, we're going to open it up to the audience. So start thinking of your questions now and get ready to put your hands up. So to kick things off, let's do a quick fire round. If each one of you can introduce yourselves and then in 1 second, in one sentence rather, 1 second will be hard, answer what does personalization mean to you? Cara, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I'm Cara Henne. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Wolf & Badger. For those of you who don't know us yet, I hope, we are a marketplace for what we call the world's best independent brands. So that's across fashion, jewelry, accessories, homeware, and beauty. And for us, and for me personally, personalisation means using data across all touch points, so really looking at it from an omni-channel point of view and bringing all the data together that is most useful, like customer lifetime value, information about favorite products, favorite designers that people buy, etc., bringing it all together to inform a holistic business strategy. So it's all about analyzing data every day, testing and tweaking every day to, it's not a static thing. Personalization is, for me, something very active. That's happening, dynamic, that's happening every day.
Thank you.
Cool. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Trouva. We basically go off and find the best small independent shops in the creative capitals of the world. London, Berlin, mainly in Europe right now. And what we're trying to do is really bring them to the forefront and make them available and accessible to the customers. So people that want to find the latest homeware styles and trends, or across lifestyle, basically. And part of that, for us, personalization is really, it's more of an understanding that we want to be creating value at every single point of the customer journey. And whether that is when they are on Trouva.com or that is on our marketing activities, we want to ensure that we're not just showing people content without knowing that they actually want that content to be shown to them. So it's really about figuring out how to be relevant instead of being creepy. And that's kind of what it means to us.
Cool. I'm Becky. You may recognize me from the lovely case study shown earlier.
So much smaller in person.
So I'm CRM manager at Wonderbly. I've been there a couple of years now. And I've seen a massive change. So when I started, we had one book, and we saw great success off the back of Dragon's Den. And we now have a range of 14, which might seem quite small to a lot of you here, but our whole business is built on personalization. So every book has hundreds of variants and takes thousands of hours to produce. So personalization, to me, I think, is treating a customer as they are. So a unique individual with individual needs, wants, fears, which is what our books do. So it's what our marketing should do. Our marketing should reflect our business.
Cool. I'm Djalal. I'm in charge of product at Ometria. What I typically do is ask a lot of repetitive, annoying questions to all the customers here. And for me, personalization, there's two key components to personalization. One is, first of all, understanding customer and their needs. And the second one is making sure, like everyone said here, is to make sure that the marketing experience, the customer experience, is relevant across all possible touch points, and they're always consistent every single time.
Nice. Well, let's get into some of the juicy details of that. I think that's a really nice introductory opening about what personalization means to us. But maybe let's talk about what kind of personalization turns people on and what kind of personalization turns people off. Cara, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think the most off-putting thing for us is too many emails. And they can be beautifully personalized, high caro, and showing you the most wonderful things. But if it's too much, that's really tricky. The problem is figuring out what is too much. So it's really, again, the constant twisting and tweaking and constant experimentation of how much can you actually engage with a customer, how much do they want to engage with you as well. For me, that's kind of the core thing, what turns people off. But turning people on, there's much more, I hope, and I guess. So first of all, for us, what works really well is everything new. It seems to be that people are generally curious and want to see new things. So we have a weekly newsletter about what's new. So that could be new collections, new designers that we bring on board. We have over 650 brands that we work with, so there's new stuff all the time. And lots of curation there. We started bringing in editors' picks as well, which makes it more personal for users as well. So that seems to be working really, really well. So yeah, that's really something that works well. And we always have a part at the bottom of the newsletter saying curated just for you, so showing people the right products. Which seems to be working really well as well. Local content is also something that people like very much. So if we have a monthly events newsletter because we host a lot of Meet the Maker and other events in store, Fashion Week parties, things like that. And we see how that is working really well. Funnily, the products, so we often show the products of the Meet the Maker events, and they sell really well through these emails. So these things, all of these connected with subject lines as well. So we did a lot of testing on subject lines and figured out that really keeping them consistent is very important, for us at least. We've seen other strategies, and when you read about it, it seems that different things work for different people. But for us, it's really, if you call something new arrivals, new in, perfect. You say, tell it as it is. Someone else has used this line before, but I hope we use it in a positive sense. But yeah, this seems to work really, really well for us.
It's an amazing list of really useful examples. I think everyone's quickly jotting down notes to go off and do now. Anyone else has any thoughts?
I think for me, a turn-off would be what I would call like surface-level personalization. So when a company like frames comms as if they're talking directly to you, but then they'll give you really irrelevant product recommendations or really irrelevant content, so you know they've not actually done any work into your propensity to buy a particular product. And then a turn-on, opposite to that, is really helpful personalization. So you showed our example with deep linking into the canvas, stripping out layers of the purchase journey, giving you really good product recommendations based on what you've viewed in the past, stuff like that. Nice. So making sure it's genuinely helpful and not just slapping someone's name on an email.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. I think on a different, well, it ties to all of this. The idea of intruding in someone else's personal space, either by asking for personal details without specifically showing what the reason is, and I guess that ties nicely into GDPR as well, that can really alienate people, because at the end of the day, if you're gathering personal data about me, I want to know why you're doing this and how you're going to create value. And if I do give you that data, the next time you get in touch with me, you should utilize that information and not give me the relevant stuff on that. I think it's very important to have a consistent kind of data strategy and how to utilize it at the end of the day, and not just take as much data as you can because you can. I think that's very
Have you seen any change? So have you seen, now that people have much more control over their data, are they less likely to?
I think it takes a lot more time for us to really understand what the effects are going to be, both in terms of adding commercial value and how retailers are really going to be able to leverage GDPR, post-GDPR kind of retail. But at the same time, I do think that the customer experience is going to change quite dramatically from here onwards, because there needs to be a justification for gathering certain data. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think Alex made a great point. I think post-GDPR, even though the message itself or the ad itself might not be might not seem like a turn-off, but because people haven't given the permission to the brand to actually retarget and market to them, they might get upset and frustrated much easier. So I think you need to be very careful how you're retargeting customers and what data you're collecting.
I guess brands often try to own their customer and talk about owning their customer. But if you're a multi-brand retailer, that's not as easy, and a couple of you are. Do you even need to do it? Alex, what's your take on it?
I think the premise of owning the customer is as faulty as the thinking of having a single user view, because it just disguises the underlying problem, which is you don't want to own the customer should be able to own the experience that you're providing them with. And that means that as a brand and as a product, you need to be able to react in a way that the customer wants when they're using Trouva.com or whatever other website. So at the end of the day, for us, I mean, we have about 450 independent shops across the UK, about 30 now in Berlin and expanding in other geographies. And we identified that our edge is that every single one of these shops is run by a master curator, someone who was previously an interior designer or a buyer or something like that, who represents a specific style. And when someone subscribes to the style of one shop, that is a good way for us to find other shops that have the same style and then continue the personalization on that level. So I think at the end of the day, we adjust our product based on what the customer experience is, not trying to make the customer believe in certain values that we have as a brand. I don't think that works in that way. What do you think? I mean, you guys have a very similar kind of problem as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree that owning the customer is tricky, or is it really something that we want to do? We know that we are, of the products that we offer are premium. We don't normally call them luxury, but really premium quality. And we know that people cross-shop massively. So when we did a survey recently of like all the brands that our customers buy, and it really starts at the Zara's, at Whistles, funnily, up to the Stella McCartneys and Vivienne Westwoods. And we know people cross-dress continuously, so basically owning them completely is really difficult. We recently introduced a rewards program, which is something that really helps us to own customers more, because it gives us a different reason to engage with them as well. We made it really simple. Our rewards program is solely based on the spend. So basically really just the customer lifetime value, which seems to be working best and really surprised some people. They're like, oh, we just realized that we've actually spent quite some money here over the last few years, and really makes them, I always hate the word loyal because I don't really believe loyalty exists. But, it makes them probably slightly more loyal. And, if you want to own them, that's a good step towards at least making a stronger connection.
Definitely. How much personalization about the content, and how much is about the context? And do we think one needs to drive the other? Becky, I guess Wonderbly seem to have both the content and the context pretty nailed. So do you have a view on either?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think context does drive content, but in turn content can create context, so it can be like a nice loop. So I think in order to resonate with your customer, you obviously need to know who they are, what they want, so you can influence that. So context starts with data, whether it's product data, so the occasion they're buying for, the price point they're going for, whether it's customer context, so demographics, their relationship to the child, and all of those data points then come together to create segments, and then you create content for those particular segments. So to give an example of something that we do, we realised that a large proportion of our base buy for Christmas and birthdays, and we want to branch out. We want to get people to buy for no occasion. We also know that a big chunk of our base are grandparents. So we're creating content for National Grandparents' Day. And then within that, we're going to tie in one of our books, which is called The Littlest Bear. And within this book, you can add characters for your whole family, including the grandparents. So we try and find creative ways to tie our products into content that we think that will appeal to particular demographics. Another example I could give you is that we're quite like a low-frequency Q4 focused business. So what we try and do is try and find international events that we can tap into that we know will have high engagement naturally. Things like Halloween, if you've got kids, it's something you might be interested in. And then we'll try and segue our products into that. So we have a new launch called Magboggle, which is like a mystery kit game. So that, and then stuff like Comic-Con will push our power within superhero books. So it's just finding stuff that, like high engagement events to tie our products into. But yeah, I think it's a combination of the two, for sure.
Very cool. Anyone else?
Yes, I think as we get sort of, as you mentioned during your talk, the customer experiences or customer expectations are increasing on a daily basis. And I think as we get more into this real-time world, having contextual information will be vital, but you need to have the content ready for it. And I always use this example, I went to LA about a year ago, and I just rented a car and I was looking for a cable. And I Googled sort of a cable, a charger for my phone, and Google was able to provide a contextual ad to me where I can buy a cable very quickly rather than ordering it online. And as customers start to expect that kind of experience, I think it's important to take that real time into account and making sure that you have the content ready to be able to market to customers in the right way, depending on the situation that they're in.
How far are you willing to push it in terms of going beyond the content to the product? I guess your product is super personalized at Wonderbly, but Alex, Cara, would you consider changing your product mix entirely based on the customer demands? You're now both, substantial businesses. I wouldn't call either of you startups, and therefore you now have this huge customer base, and you have quite an ingrained understanding of what kind of products that you sell. But if the personalization for that customer required you to move away from what you believe is the underlying product concept that you have, would you be willing to do that?
We went through that process significantly over the last, I would say, year and a half, where we used to do much more curation, particularly when it comes to the advertising space. And we had to give up all of our vanity and really let the AI decide what's best. And luckily, we have a product catalogue of over 40,000 products. I don't think we'd ever be in a position where we'd have to change the products that we offer, but really what we show. And it's absolutely wonderful when we look at, the Facebook and Google and all these algorithms, what they can provide and what products they surface. And it's an incredible mix. It's not just the best sellers or what we believe will sell well. But it is this wonderful mix, and when we look into the data, it's really different for every single customer, and all of a sudden we start selling a product that's been there for 6 months, it's never sold, or a brand new product that was just added. So yeah, when you give up all vanity, and we still do a lot of curation, and we do things like styling videos that work really well, and where we obviously take into consideration bestsellers, and a lot of feedback from our customer service as well, so that we can personalize the styling videos. But for ads, it's really mostly AI driven.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, the underlying business model relies on us believing that the best independent shops have a place in the future because they're in the high street. They have their ear to the ground, and they are able to see where the trends are going, what new brands are up and coming, all that kind of stuff. And we're never going to intrude in that because we're not best placed to be deciding on what inventory comes to Trouva in the first place, right? But as you said, from our perspective, yeah, we need to utilize more modern techniques to be able to surface the products and the content that each individual user is looking for at that point in their user journey. And I think that's quite exciting because we're moving away from this idea of I need to have a single user view where I need to be able to look at one profile and see all their interactions and decide what to do with them, which is faulty, right? It's like a broker being able to look at every single stock that they're selling and ignoring that high frequency trading exists, which does transactions, 20,000 transactions in a nanosecond, right? That's kind of where we're moving, right? I mean, as we grow on scale, we can't decide on every single user. We need to set up the systems that do that. But the underlying business model needs to have an edge because what you're selling has to be adding value.
So a quick follow-up question on something you mentioned right at the beginning of that. A couple of years ago, we were doing some fundraising. We were speaking to some venture capitalists, and one particular fund said that we really like what you're doing, but we're not going to invest, and it's for a very unique reason. We think that in 10 years' time, you won't have a customer base. We think there will be no mid-sized retailers and retail brands at all. There will be Amazon and potentially a couple of others that focus on, say, fashion, like Zalando, and that will be it. Now, clearly, we've proven them wrong so far, right? But do you believe that those independent physical stores have a strong future? How do you feel about that?
I think they have a brighter future than ever, and obviously I'm biased. But I do think that what we've learned so far is that there is one aspect of retail which is around ultimate convenience, right? It's about price comparison and getting things very, very quickly, typically more in the commoditized space. And then there's another aspect of retail which is really around experience, discovery, inspiration, right? And really strong brands, right? And I do think that Amazon, obviously, and I think it's wrong to just talk about Amazon, right? Like if you look at the Chinese ecosystem, there's a lot more going on there. But I do think that there is a very specific trend that will continue and accelerate in the future, which is around building up brands and building up experiences that add value, especially in touch and feel areas. And I do think that being able to bring individuals together that have a very specific aspect, which is this master curation, this experience in picking the right brands and the right items, bringing those guys together and providing them with the abilities and the economies of scale that the big guys have, actually, I do believe that that is part of the future. But I guess you guys look at it in a similar perspective as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, the Amazons of the world have a space, but we see that particularly, with the millennials, Generation Z, Y, whatever they're called, or the latest generation, there's this strong urge for individualization, right? And there is so much out there that curation now is really important. And, I used to work for Google and YouTube was always talking about how, YouTube is great now, but at some point someone needs to curate because there's so much content. And I think the same thing happens in fashion, in design, in beauty products, whatever it is, where there's so much out there and people want individual brands, they want to be individual, but someone needs to help them with the curation. So what the two of us are doing is really essential, I think, moving forward. If it's not just, the black t-shirt, sorry. The black t-shirts before. If it's not just, the pen that you need to buy on Amazon, that's always the same, and you always buy exactly the same product, but you want something unique, you need the curation aspect.
I also believe it's important to always remind ourselves that the high street is by no means dead. I mean, there's all these talk about the big chains going under and all that kind of stuff. Really, at the end of the day, the post-mortem will show that the experience was shit in the offline space, right? I mean, it's just clear. So I do think that there's a lot more that's going to happen in the high street as well. There is a downturn, obviously, and there is a transformation going on. But the places that still provide beautiful experiences, they are thriving. They don't just survive on the high street, and I think there's a lot more that can be done there, and omnichannel is very relevant.
That leads me on to, my next question, which is, what is the biggest challenge that retailers are facing to creating those personalized experiences? Maybe not just online, but offline, but certainly in our case, across all of marketing. I mean, Jalal, we work with a lot of retailers. We deliver personalized experiences to over 100 million individually identified customers, across the 120 retailers that we work with. And your role is about planning the future of this. So what challenges do you foresee to the next step of it?
Sure. So I think since we started Ometria, we probably spoke to about 300 to 400 marketers. And there are three key challenges that come up every single time. And there's no direct correlation whether you're a small brand or a large brand with a huge team. The first one is probably resources, is that if you think you're a small retailer and as you grow, you think it's going to get easier, it's not. Because in order to create highly personalized one-to-one experiences, you need a very sophisticated creative team, whether you're creating subject lines, copy, very nicely created sort of hero images. It's very difficult. And even if you do have a creative team, in order to manage and sort of optimize those campaigns, it's a full-time job. So resource is definitely something that is a problem today. The second one is the knowledge. So knowledge about your customers. So really understanding what the customer behavior is. How many emails should I send to a customer? What channel are they most likely to interact with? So really understanding the customer is very difficult. And there's a lot of technologies out there that help people do that, but they require a lot of investment. And the other side of knowledge is, as you mentioned in your slide, you had sort of, 100 ESPs on that slide. So that's only ESPs, but then you have sort of all kinds of other technologies out there. You have retargeting tools, you have customer behavioral tools, you have agencies. So you have 1,000 different technologies to choose from. And most retailers are struggling to understand which one is best for their personal, I guess, needs and brands. And then the team structure, the implementation of that, all that is very difficult. And the third one is the technology itself. Because as, once again, you mentioned, a lot of the tools that retailers are using, they weren't built for retail-specific use cases. So it's very difficult to achieve the use cases that you want. And even if you do achieve those use cases, and let's say the tool that you've inherited, it might be a legacy system, does solve all the use cases that you want, it's basically a combination of multiple tools that they've acquired, put together, and the user workflow, the UI, the efficiency, creating those experiences is basically that technology is adding additional barriers to that don't help marketers achieve what they want, but actually prevent them from doing that. It'll be good to hear from actual retailers in terms of what your challenges are.
I'd just add to your point on customer behavior. So I think a lot of people now are at the position where they can get like website interaction data, email data, purchase data. It might be in different systems, but it's available. I think it's really important to get like a deeper level of data. So if you really want to look at someone's intent to purchase in the future, then it's important to collect stuff like we do, so like occasion data. So are you buying for a birthday, a christening? What's your relationship to the child you're buying for? So we do that through a post-purchase survey, and we also look at the messages that people write in our books to try and look for keywords like grandparent, mother. So yeah, I think it's just important to get that deeper level data, and then also get that into a system where it's usable for marketers.
Yeah.
Coming back to what you said about technology, I think the most important thing there is that I think all of us work for really agile businesses, and we talked about that before actually, that our businesses are changing all the time, and we really need to adapt to the customer, which is probably also part of the personalization. We started as an offline business, and online was just a little bit of a side business, and we became very, very online. Now we're actually opening a huge store in King's Cross in a few weeks' time, and we're very excited about it. So, as you said, the high street isn't dead, but we are constantly adapting, changing, experimenting, and often the technology doesn't. And then we're stuck. Not you guys, don't get me wrong, but there's so much technology that we work with, and we work together all the time, and how much testing do we do, and do give feedback and say, oh, can we develop this, and then half a year later we do it. But there's a lot of technology that we work with that doesn't do that, and then we're stuck in 2014, but we are already thinking of 2025, and we just can't get there because the technology just isn't there yet, and then constantly trying to fix things on the side is also really, really tricky. So I think that's a big challenge for us, definitely.
It's been a really incredible experience, because actually all three of your companies we've worked with pretty much since the very beginning.
Yeah.
So we have watched as you have grown. I remember when Lost My Name, as it was then called, raised a giant amount of money from Google Ventures and just blew up everywhere. And it was just it was great to watch that. But also you believed in us very early. Wolf and Badger used us purely for customer insight, before there was even a marketing kind of part of the platform, before we were actually creating those experiences. So the technology, I think, has to evolve at that sort of pace, because we have to keep up with what you need. Otherwise, you won't be able to deliver the experiences that you need to your customer. I have so many follow-up questions, but I'm mindful I'd also love to take some questions from the audience. So has anyone got anything that they would like to ask? Maybe I'll give you a couple of minutes to think of one. And I'll ask one of my follow-up questions. So Jalal, you mentioned there are three challenges. The second and third being there are too many technologies in the industry, and that they're not really built for retail, hopefully get solved by us, right? Mm-hmm. Easy. The first one is creating all of the content that's necessary to create those very, very personalized experiences. Do you face that challenge now, and are you solving it in some way?
I think it's one of the biggest challenges that you are, if you're a retailer right now, you face that challenge 100%, mainly because you could get away with silos before. Now you can't. So if you don't have your product or technology team talking to your business intelligence team, talking to your marketing team, talking to your editorial team, really you need cross-functional teams to be able to create that personalized content, to be able to create strategies that are end-to-end. I mean, if you're really going down the line of personalization through content, even your tone of voice in customer support should have that context, right? And I think that's a fundamental concern and problem right now, anywhere, even in smaller businesses. It's like, how do you have that clear line across all the different parts of the business that are able to speak the same language within the same context?
Yeah.
And I think that big problem. I mean, the way we're trying to solve it is really promoting the idea of having cross-functional teams, creating squads that have people from product, from data, from editorial, from the different business functions, and figuring out, okay, how are we going to solve this problem all together, and how are we going to reflect the changes, not just on the technology side of things or in customer support, but across the entire business. Yeah, learning and trying to do it better, I guess.
Yeah, I guess bringing it all together is really important.
Yeah.
And for us, it's bringing the off and online data together as well. I think that's the crux here, and for us, the holy grail. Bringing it all together so that we know what's happening in our stores offline. I guess it's for you, it's the same thing, but probably even trickier. How do you get the data from the stores and then understanding what's happening there and then what's happening online? Because the worst thing is you're sending out an email and saying, hey, we haven't seen you in a while, but they went to our store yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, and how do you make sure? So, you know, we constantly train our staff, our offline staff, to really collect as much data as possible so we can bring all of this together. And, you know, we actually had a workshop about it yesterday where we said we don't really see on and offline. For us, it's omni-channel.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, that's really tricky. And then if you can bring all of that together and you can anticipate the next step. And I guess there sometimes I wish we had a bigger business intelligence team where we could really predict. And we're looking at data every day saying, okay, you know, if someone buys a jumpsuit, they're very likely to be a high-value customer or something like that, you know, if that's their first step. So really anticipating what their next step is before they actually know that. And sometimes a bit jealous of the ASOSs of the world who have much bigger data teams that can just basically plow through all of that, and obviously much more data as well to start with.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's our aim.
I think for us with content, it's starting small. I think sometimes once you've defined all these different customer segments, there's like an urge to do something completely different for each of those, but actually it can be the tiny changes that drive the biggest uplift. So with our personalised campaigns, it's just adding a character for the child that they bought for previously. It could be slightly tweaking the copy to target a particular audience, and you can do that all within one email and use dynamic content rather than going overboard and briefing in 20 different emails for 20 different segments. So yeah, just starting small.
Yes. Thank you. Oh, we've got a microphone coming your way. Thank you for kicking us off.
That's all right. If resources are limited, what aspects of personalization do you feel are most important to get across to the customer? So like, I've got quite a small creative team. So what sort of aspects would you say are the most important things to actually do in personalization on emails?
Who wants to take this?
Product recommendations, I would say. Very, very briefly, yeah. And just the hello. So for us, as you said, sometimes it's the tiny little things, and just the, not just hi there, but the hello Caroline is already so important.
If you have no idea who the customer is, or like the segments, and you're trying to kind of slowly start to work yourself through, then sometimes being honest about that in the way that you're creating your campaigns actually goes a long way. If you don't know anything about them, just admit it to yourself. And then the way that you create your content, the way that you try to talk to them, you can allude to that. It actually works quite nicely. But then you want to really think about, okay, how do I, through my campaigns, through the landing pages I send them to or whatever, how do I start collecting relevant content that I then know I will utilize in a certain way? I think the biggest mistake of the past, at least from my perspective, is that too many of us as retailers decided to just take everything. Like whatever data you could find, you would take it because, oh yeah, retrospectively, when I have a question, I will have the data to answer it. Doesn't work. Like, do not do that. Have a precise strategy. Try to only take the data that you utilize in order to solve certain problems down the line.
Yeah.
I think that could be something.
We had another question there.
Hi guys, thank you for that. That was really interesting. I just wondered, I guess particularly for Trouva and Wonderbly, in terms of self-purchase versus gifting, how you approach or any challenges you face with changing the content and the personalisation in that area.
I guess for Wonderbly, the majority of our customers, well, all of our customers are gifters because the books are for children. It'd be weird if a 4-year-old was buying for themselves. So for us, it's not that much of a challenge, but I guess our challenge is to get that gifter to come back and buy again, depending on who the child was they bought for. So for example, a lot of our customers will come and buy for their niece or nephew or for a child of a friend, and that's it. They have no intention to come back and buy from us again. So for us, it's creating a need and tailoring our comms slightly to make them think of different children throughout the year. Yeah.
Well, from our perspective, in the current phase we're in, we see that most of our customers, the reason why they come to Trouva in the first place is access to homewares. It is a very fragmented space. Online penetration isn't that good. You've got thousands of small independent brands coming up and growing really quickly, like the Tom Dixons of the world, the Hayes, the Veyas, right? And so being able to get access to those in one space, that's the value proposition we provide. Homewares, typically people buy for themselves. The life event is a new flat, a new home, trying to decorate it. And then we try to bring them into the other categories we also serve, because our shops do have like 60% homewares, 20% fashion accessories, and the rest is going to be men's and women's fashion. It's kind of getting them to get to the next step there. At the same time, homewares is quite nice for gifting as well, so we do try to get them back on certain occasions like Christmas, and we do see a lot of traction. I guess every retailer sees Christmas as the big Hail Mary of the year. So that still happens as well, but that's kind of how we think about it. In terms of personalization, if you have a very strong point that you know something is coming up, a birthday or whatever, you can try it. I'm generally not a big fan of trying those types of aspects because I believe, at least from our brand, it doesn't really speak to the customer in that way. I think it works a lot better for other companies that are a lot more gifting focused. I don't know how you guys see it, because fashion as well.
Yeah, we actually sometimes face a similar challenge. We have a menswear newsletter as well, and menswear for us is much smaller than women's wear, or just women as an overall target audience. But when we looked into the data, we really found out that a lot of women buy menswear as well. Yeah. And so we've changed our menswear newsletter and send it out to everybody and really have different sections that we make the wording much more vague and basically say, okay, here are the perfect men's travel accessories. So it could also be something, if you travel with a man, you might as well want to buy them, or, say his favorites or something like that. And that seems to work much better. And so, yeah, we have a strong gifting focus as well, and that is one of the aspects that we look at. But it's the other way around as well. We sell a lot of jewelry, women's jewelry, and we see that a lot of men buy that and probably not for themselves. So, that's always, there's always strategies and twisting and tweaking happening there as well. Yeah.
I think that's pretty much all the time we have today. What we are going to just do is a one-sentence answer to it. Is AI going to help us with personalization? Jalal?
Definitely.
There we go.
Oh, God. Yes.
Yes.
Don't know.
One word.
Sentence is okay.
A sentence. If we utilize it correctly, yes, but it can lead to a shit show.
We do a lot of it already, so absolutely yes, yeah.
All right, well, next year we hope to have you all back for a panel about AI. Lots of takeaways. Offline and online experiences and omnichannel world being the holy grail, something to look forward to, and those offline stores that don't get that right are the ones that are going to be going out of business. Squads of content editorial and product teams, so applying some of that engineering mindset now to the way that content is created and structuring our teams that way. Much deeper data than just browsing behavior and purchase data, which is now quite easy to get, but getting right to the depth of it to truly understand the context of why people are buying, and not getting lost in the sea of technology and making sure that you pick the right one. So a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you.